book I'm reading is by Cynthia Rowland, and it's called When I Was Young in the Mountains. Now, can you see that? Okay. One of the reasons I like this book so well is that when I was growing up, I spent time with my grandparents in the coal fields, and so I'm very familiar with when my uncles would come in from the coal mines, and this is how they looked. The only place that was clean was right here across their mouth, and all of the water had to be carried for the baths that they took. So, when I was young in the mountains, grandfather came home in the evening covered with black dust of a coal mine. Only his lips were clean, and he used to kiss the top of our heads. When I was young in the mountains, grandmother spread the table with hot cornbread, pinto beans, and fried okra. This is the family. When I visited my grandmother, I usually liked to go when corn was in season because I loved corn on the cob. Later in the middle of the night, as she walked through the grass with me to the Johnny house and held my hand in the dark, I promised never to eat more than one serving of okra. So she's on her way to the outhouse. When I was young in the mountains, we walked across the cow pasture and through the woods carrying our towels. The swimming hole was dark and muddy, and sometimes we saw snakes, but we jumped in anyway. On our way home, we stopped at Mr. Crawford's for a mound of white butter. Mr. Crawford and Mrs. Crawford looked alike, and they always smelled of sweet milk. When I was young in the mountains, we pumped pails of water from a well at the bottom of the hill. And we heated the water to fill round tin tubs for our baths. Afterward, we stood in front of the old black stove, shivering and giggling while Grandma heated cocoa. When I was young in the mountains, we went to a church and a schoolhouse on Sundays, and sometimes walked with the congregation through the cow pasture to the dark swimming hole for baptisms. My cousin Peter was laid back into the water, and his white shirt stuck to him, and my grandmother cried. I always wanted to be tall enough to ring the bell to call everybody to church. I never got tall enough to do that. When I was young in the mountains, we listened to the frogs sing at dusk and at dark. And we woke to cowbells outside our windows. Sometimes a black snake came in the yard, and my grandmother would threaten it with a hoe. If it did not leave, she used the hoe to kill it. 4 of us once draped a snake around our necks. Dead snake, of course. And we took a photograph of that. When I was young in the mountains, we sat on the porch swing in the evening, and my grandfather sharpened my pencils with his pocket knife, and grandmother sometimes shelled beans and sometimes braided a rug. The dogs lay around us, and the stars sparkled in the sky. A Bob White whistled in the forest. Bob White, Bob White. When I was young in the mountains, I never wanted to go to the ocean, and I never wanted to go to the desert. I never wanted to go anywhere else in the world, for I was in the mountains, and that was always enough. So I hope that you have good memories of visiting with your grandparents, and it may not have been the same adventure that I had, but talk to them, have them tell their stories to you.